tight end analysis for week 4. I'm Jason Gilbo, J Gilboa, and with me is Russell Clay at Russell J Clay, breaking down 5 tight ends for us, value, GPP, and cash game options. You and I are on pretty much the exact same page for this week. I think it's kind of hard not to be, just given the fact that these guys are really in such plus matchups.
And I wrote up the tight ends the same way I did the running backs. I think there's 2 great pay up options, and I think there's 2 great pay down options. They're all basically cash for me, but obviously you feel better paying up at it based on usage. So I guess we'll just get into it. Jordan Reed at 6,300, totally fine with paying up here. I know he hasn't, really paid off at all so far this year, but they keep just tossing it to Jamison Crowder every time they get in the red zone. If they start to utilize Reed, this offense is really going to start moving against this Browns offense or Browns defense. I really think they're going to move the ball really well. Reed's still a main option in this offense. I don't really care about Pierre Garçon and all that. So certainly like him as a top end option. And this Cleveland defense is all about giving up fantasy points so far this year.
Yeah, hard not to really like Reed in this matchup. I think we both, Kirk Cousins is a viable GPP option. I think he's the pairing that you probably want to go with. But yeah, cash game tight end. There's really no argument with Reed. And same thing with this next guy here, Greg Olsen, who my favorite play for this week, comes in at 300 less, but obviously both kind of top dollar guys.
Yeah, Greg Olsen at 6K is like stealing. That's so cheap. You can definitely throw him in the flex. You can throw both these guys in the lineup, I think, to be unique. And I'd feel really comfortable with them as standalone and stacking options in cash and tournaments. So, yeah, really simple way to get a lot of value. Unlike most tight ends, these guys are basically the main weapons in their passing game. Obviously, you have Deshaun Jackson and Kelvin Benjamin, but these guys are, the main target guys. So I like them quite a bit. Carolina, is going to have an easier week overall. So I think this will be a nice bounce back for sure.
Yep, I definitely do too. In terms of GPPs, you're looking at Kobe Fleener, but as you mentioned, some of these guys are cash game viable. Is Fleener kind of just GPP or is he still cash?
He's Kobe Fleener, so I don't know how much cash we can throw. How much we can throw him into cash games, but he's close. This is a great matchup. The Chargers have struggled against tight ends so far this year. He's only 3,200. He's a flexing cash, I think. 3,200 for Kobe Fleener. Guy's getting like 8 targets a game in a Drew Brees offense. Obviously, the splits for Brees home and road are terrible. You worry about that, but I'm not worried about Kobe Fleener getting 10 or less points. I feel like that's fairly reasonable. The only reason I find it easy to fade him in his price range is because of Zach Miller at 2,700. I think that's a really easy pay down. I don't understand the 2,700 pricing coming off a 2 touchdown, really solid performance with Brian Hoyer at the helm against this Detroit team who struggled all year so far to, allow passing touchdowns. They obviously allowed 4 to Aaron Rodgers last week in the first half. I think Zach Miller is a tremendous option. And honestly, price considered, one of the best plays on the entire slate, if not the best play on the slate.
Yeah, 2,700. I think Miller's going to be the guy who I just click in and start going from there because one, he opens up a ton of value. As you mentioned, this matchup with Detroit just kind of it's what you want in terms of looking at tight ends. Them in Atlanta just seem to be horrendous.
Literally, you do the pricing, it's like 2 of Zach Miller is 5,400. You know what I mean? Like he's 2 of him is like, a mid-priced wide receiver. Like, so it's just like so unreal in the flex. Even if you want to pay up for that tight end with Olsen or Reed, I still feel like you're just heading to the same problem at flex where you're like, all right, well, I use someone else at tight end, but I'm like, I still have to put him in here.
It's especially with the backs that, I mean, you highlighted two guys that you want to look to pay up for at running back and wide receivers
Mhm.
this week. It just seems like you want to get exposure to those guys, and it just everything works out perfectly this week because tight ends that are in good spots and so cheap are so cheap to help kind of get you to that structure.
And most of the time, like there's pay down tight ends, and you're like, yeah, I'll throw them in my flex, and I think they got a good shot at a touchdown this week. It's like, no, Zach Miller has a good shot at like 10 to 15 targets, legitimately, in this Brian Hoyer led offense that is facing a red hot Lions offense that's probably going to score 30 points against their horrific defense. So even if you don't get it in the regular game flow, you're going to get it in garbage time. And I mean, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
I
about
have strong feelings towards this, I guess.
in terms of a punt tight end who's 200 cheaper than Miller, Hunter Henry, who's filling in for the injured Antonio Gates, played every snap last week.
I actually think he's the same price. I can't confirm that, but I'm pretty sure. Let me check. Hold on. This is about to be great content.
So you're telling me that your error here is making me look like an idiot.
Yes, I'm telling you that
Thank you.
what you're reading on my article is wrong.
That makes sense.
Thankfully,
Yeah,
thankfully we have.
your ability to double check things, you know.
Thankfully, we haven't released this to the public yet. Yes, 2,700 folks for you playing at home.
Well, you take over the show. I'm gonna head off and do my own thing.
Okay, yeah, you don't want to be around me. I'm a bad influence. Kind of like in high school when the kids are drinking and they're like, I'm like, Jason, just have a shot with us. You don't have to like hang out. You can just like have a shot. And
Yeah,
then next thing you know, you're throwing up in your friend's
and like
car, and
you're in sixth period, like you're going to salary inputting class, and you're just hammered drunk and you can't do it right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah, guilty by association, my friend. Hunter Henry, if Antonio Gates is out, he looked great last week. Second round pick. Most tight ends take a while, but at Arkansas, he kind of profiled as a guy that might be able to make a pretty quick transition in the receiving game. Looks good overall. Had that one fumble, but I'm not too worried about that. I think this is a potentially great play. And with the lack of real options in that passing game, other than, I know people like Tyrell Williams, but he's far from a sure thing as a receiving option. Travis Benjamin is, but beyond him, there's not much. So Hunter Henry could certainly be second in targets when it's all said and done in that game.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think you look at that fumble, trying to make something happen towards the end of the game. You can't really knock him for that. It wasn't really a fundamental thing. I think it was just him looking to try and get down the field. So I like him a lot.
Yeah.
And you talked about possible strategy of using him and Miller together.
I think that's delightful. I mean, it's tough. I honestly think you're going to be leaving more money on the table this week than and sometimes you want. But if you do something like this, you can fit that, Bell, Johnson, Hopkins, and Antonio Brown type of group into your lineup. And whenever you can do that, I think you should at least evaluate it and see if it's viable,
Yeah, I definitely do too. I mean, to open things up like that, that's a steal. Overall, I mean, pretty solid group here. I think this is where a lot of people are going to be going. Kind of hard to go elsewhere.
Yep.
So let's wrap things up with the DraftKings tight end analysis for week 4. Be sure to head on over to Daily Fantasy Cafe to check out all our great tools and content. If you like what you're seeing on the videos here, be sure to give our YouTube channel a subscribe.